Hi, Nancy. We have picked up shop and we moved it to a kitchen that you should probably find familiar. We just thought it would be a little quieter and so you could hear the answers better, besides, in addition to seeing the star of our show here. So I got through about half of your questions, and so we'll finish them now. And then I think we can anybody just chime in. I mean, this doesn't need to have to be,
Programs.
it doesn't have to be so formal, but we do want to get through Nancy's because she could not be here. Okay, so you remember what you paid for the farm is $100 an acre.
Yes.
$8,000.
Yes.
Paid off in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Actually,
We still had to keep borrowing, for other essentials, but we wanted to pay the folks off.
Yeah, and so the loan was from WO and Sarah.
Yes.
The 8,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm curious about that because I thought WO and Sarah were pretty hard hit during the Depression, and they didn't have much even to loan out.
Yeah, but they eventually were able to sell that beautiful home in Minneapolis, and they had some money.
Okay.
Not a whole lot. I don't know what it sold for. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But
Probably by the time 48 came along, they had probably established WO as a lawyer in the area, and he may have been doing some work that allowed him a salary.
Mm-hmm. See, he took care of the Lila Stark's farm, the Miller farm up on County P, and I think he took care of somebody else's farm and little side jobs. When somebody'd buy a building or something, why he was able to complete the paperwork and collect the money But I don't know in dollars and cents, what he did, what he made, but
So that's how you met the Millers then, was through Lila.
was through WO, was
Mhm.
taking, and first I knew Marshall Miller. He walked in the house one day with his beautiful suit, Army suit on, Air Force suit.
Mm-hmm.
Army Air Force.
And that was the first I met Marshall Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been what, right after the war?
Yes.
Yeah, 45 or 6 or
Let's see,
Something like
the
that.
treaties were signed in 45, weren't they?
yes.
VJ and VE Day.
Yeah. Well, Nancy goes on to say, did Grandpa and Grandma Newhouse have some turkeys up on their hill farm so that it was natural for Dad to start off with turkeys, maybe even in that first year?
Yes. I think they'd even raised a few in North Dakota when they could.
Okay.
But they had started some turkeys. And I think I remember reading some letters that your dad would write to W.O. and Sarah about, he was involved with the welfare of the turkeys too, about setting up, he was still in school in Minnesota, but that spring he was writing back and forth about how he would like the setup or that, or how many, or little things like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was writing to his parents in Illinois.
Yeah.
Not to anybody out in North Dakota.
Right.
Correct.
They were in Illinois and planning to stay there, and Dad was not going back to school anymore.
Yeah. 2 years when it was.
He was in Minnesota University.
Yeah, it always kind of tickled me that I wound up, and Ellie and Claire wound up living and growing up about 2 miles away from where Dad went to college.
Yeah.
We're right near the
Yeah.
St. Paul campus, right
I
there.
remember Dad went to hear Terry Hale give a lecture at the university one time when we were up visiting you,
Yeah,
and I
we
went
were too.
over. Gee, I got brave and I went over and picked him up. How'd I do that?
Well, it was.
He studied English for his first 2 years though, right, Bill? Was he an English major?
I don't know as he was. think it was just kind of
I
general.
think so, because some of his college textbooks ended up at our house. And
really?
they were, I still have them, you should get
I
them.
didn't know that.
And I think he did.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to see that.
Or
So you
with-
got them?
Yes, yeah, composition book or something like that, so,
Huh.
yeah. I'm supposed to downsize, Brian, I'll be sending them your way.
I'd love to take them.
Would that just be general
Could be
classes that to start out
A-
college with?
A
Or,
freshman.
an associate's portion of it.
oh, he always could write so well, so beautifully.
Okay, Nancy wants to know if so. Grandma and Grandpa Newhouse had turkeys on the hill.
Hmm. Boy, that's a long ways around it.
Yeah. If so, okay. Let me just start over. I'm going to read this question again because I'm not sure if she's talking about Grandma and Grandpa's farm or your farm. So I'm going to start again. Did Grandpa and Grandma Newhouse have some turkeys up on their hill farm so that it was natural for Dad to start off with some turkeys, maybe even his first year? The answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
If so, about how many? I think she's referring to Grandma and Grandpa. How many turkeys did they have? Sorry about this. I'm not quite sure.
I don't know. I think less than 100.
Okay.
I'll say 60 or less than 100.
Okay.
Well, at that time that was all occurring, Dad coming home from college, Dad had yet to meet you. You were living down at the bottom of the hill. Is that about right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, you were only 11 or 12 years old because I remember Dad commenting once that when he talked to MR and Hazel, you weren't old enough and he made the decision he was just going to wait around for you to be old enough to marry.
Yeah,
And so
that's
was
right.
there probably about 5 years in there or longer?
Oh, probably about 5 years.
So what was your first memory of Bill?
Well, I was in high school and it was a terrible snowstorm. And we were, snowed in. And he walked down the hill and I guess he must have come to the house and was visiting a while and all of a sudden he wondered if I would like to go out and build a snowman or something. And so we did. But we ended up making a snow fort. We made a good, substantial packed snow fort. Yeah. And that was kind of our first acquaintance with each other, as far as I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we had said hello and like that.
Sounds like a very cool start.
Yeah, very cool is right.
So when were you smitten with him?
When?
How long did it take you that you kept thinking about him?
Oh dear, it wasn't then. I mean, that was just a good time. I suppose about in my senior year, and into the summer and winter, and from then on.
So the snow building, how old? A snow fort building. How old were you? Might you have been at that point?
Oh, I'll say 16.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. And you were married at 18. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
19 shortly after. We were married on May 7th. And then,
Yeah. July 3rd, you would have been 19.
What did MR and Hazel think of you marrying such an older man?
They never said a word. I was all right with them. Oh, I know they liked Bill. Yeah. He had a lot of good friends.
Back to the turkeys. Nancy is wondering how many turkeys and might you have had in your first year or so,
Oh dear.
and chickens and pigs and lambs early. Like kind of what was I think you mentioned that back at the restaurant.
Yes.
That he tried a little bit of this and a little bit of that, 4 cows,
Yeah.
etc. So what was some of that early head livestock count like?
Oh dear, I suppose we maybe had less than 100 too. We started out very small.
Yeah.
And we were dry picking them for people.
Okay,
You
so
had to be small if you were gonna take the time to dry pick turkeys.
Yeah.
so
Oh, they looked so beautiful when we really had them done, though.
because someone watching this, maybe decades from now, will not know what you mean when you say dry picking. Describe what dry picking means.
You do not boil any water or dunk them in any water or anything in order to get the feathers out. You just start stripping away as soon as they're killed and bled.
Okay. And because, again, for those who've not done this, feathers generally come out easier when the feathers, is it the skin or the muscles that hold the feathers in are loosened with hot water? Is that the boiling water?
They come out much easier if they're dunked in hot water.
But dry picking is, if you've got the time, is better. It's a better result.
Yeah, because there's an extra layer of skin on turkey's body, and that serves as it serves as more of a preservative.
And
keep longer.
And so if you boil them, that extra layer of skin is lost in the boiling?
Mm-hmm.
got it.
You know that soft feel of a turkey before it's you just take a few feathers off a turkey and feel of it once. You could tell the difference.
Yep.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, then this is really interesting. I didn't know that the difference between dry picking and wet picking, or what do you call the other, dressing, or
Oh,
no?
what would you call
What
it?
do you call it when you dunk them?
You would call it a
Well,
dunk.
the standard term is just dressing a bird, and it's assumed that it is a wet process now. Nobody would dry pick a bird at this point.
No.
So what a pheasant hunter out when they bring the pheasants in, what are they doing? Are they
My dad used to put it in hot water,
really?
but we had no pluckers, so you still had to pull them out.
Okay.
Right.
Remember the good old days when there used to be pheasants around? They were so beautiful.
Right. Yeah, my dad used to kill them around Thanksgiving, I think, even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had them for Thanksgiving dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Can I throw one question in from Nancy's that before we get too far away from it?
Yeah.
You said it was the first few years you and Dad decided to live on $5 a week. Now, you and Dad being young in your marriage made that decision. I'm curious the way any newlywed couple goes about the process of making a decision. So was it just natural that you were going to live cheaply, or was there give and take, or was there serious negotiations on how you and Dad were going to do this, or what was the process, Mom?
I think we just decided we had to be very careful. And one other thing that led us to that was when we were married, we lived with W and Sarah for a short time.
Up on the hill.
Yeah.
That was cozy.
Yeah, and she insisted that we pay $5 a week towards groceries, and maybe that's where we got that $5.
Oh, okay.
I thought of that afterwards, that she wanted us to pay $5 a week for groceries.
All right. Good deal.
How long did you live with them?
Oh, I'll say 3-4 months maybe.
And then when you moved up to Paulson's, then you had the wood cook stove. That's
Yes.
And was that out in the playhouse or was that in the main house?
No, we bought it from Snowball and Eula Mae Johnson and Sharon. And they had it in a house that they were living in, and I think they were going to move to something that had, more convenient things.
And where did it sit in your kitchen?
Up against the north wall where the stove always was.
Mm-hmm.
But then the stovepipe ran to the chimney in the center.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did that stovepipe go through the room then, or was it up in the ceiling?
Up in the attic.
up through the room.
So you saw that stovepipe in the kitchen going back out of the stove to the
Yes,
chimney.
yes. As far as I know, I think we did because there was not another chimney.
Mhm,
There.
Yeah. That would have made the house nice and warm in the summer, wouldn't it? To have
Oh, yeah.
the chimney basically in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my. Well, and nice would probably be a good
But-
thing in the winter too.
But I had a little electric 2-burner plate that if it was really steamy hot, I tried to fix supper or try to cook on that.
Was the house always electrified?
Yeah, but it was wartime and we couldn't buy any conveniences.
Sure.
No electric stove or refrigerator, or we had an old ice box, and when we were in town or when we could afford it, we would bring some ice home and put ice in the ice box.
How much was a block of ice?
Oh, I suppose 50 cents, 25
How
cents.
big was a block of ice?
Foot cube.
Really?
I don't, something like this maybe.
Yeah.
Where did we get it, Marshall? I don't remember where we even got it.
I remember the Dassows, our neighbors, talking of that situation where they would come around much the same as a Schwann's man would deliver ice cream and Iceman would deliver ice in this area.
In a truck kind of
Oh.
thing? You know,
Nobody came around our place. We have to go to town for
You
it.
got your own.
Yeah.
Wow. So maybe 50 cents.
I wonder if there's a dairy company or something in Clinton that would handle it.
Well, there would have to be a need to keep things cool, and a dairy company keeping milk cool
Hmm.
would be a good, sensible guess right now.
I'm kind of thinking so, but I don't know for sure.
But a block of ice could be 10% of your weekly budget.
Yeah, good.
That wasn't cheap.
No,
That's amazing, actually. Yeah.
yeah. Well, we didn't have it all the time. Didn't have ice all the time.
Well, you were salting your meat too.
Yeah, canning meat too. Mm-hmm.
Now you were saying, I think it was last night. Do I remember when we were sitting here and I was telling you to start to get nervous about these questions, and you were starting to get nervous about these questions about cooking on that stove, and you said something about Grandma and her ability to bake bread and your ability to bake bread in a wood burning stove.
Well, my mother could make the best homemade bread. It was just wonderful in her old cook stove. But when it came time for me to do it, I never had real good luck. I think Bill always insisted he wanted the whole wheat bread, and it turned out pretty hard and pretty not so good. I think the oven wasn't right temperature or something, and there was no way of feeling it. You just put your hand in there and hope for the best.
And add a piece of wood or
Yeah.
nudge the coals around. And,
Yeah, cool it off a little or something.
Oh,
I remember you telling me that you had to know what variety of wood, whether to use oak, hickory, whatever, and how dry it was and how big the pieces were, and it was quite a science to it
yeah, I bet.
to know
Yeah. and
that
what
this
was-
pile's for bread, this pile's for cookies, this is for stew, this is for all day baked beans.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Well, here Nancy takes an interesting turn here, and there's many questions, but it's all under. She's curious about her own early times with diabetes, and so all these questions are about that. There's a bunch of them, but I'll just take them one at a time. Okay.
All right.
Do you remember your and Dad's reactions and conversations when I was hospitalized and diagnosed with diabetes in 1956 when I was 11?
Oh, we were both just very crestfallen. Just really, utterly crestfallen. I remember your dad going around saying, I wish it was me. I wish it was me. Yeah. And so, but then you pull yourself up and try and do the best you can.
Yep.
And be guided by what the doctor said.
Did you,
Oh, poor Nancy, that'd be hard for her.
well, it won't surprise her.
Yeah,
It won't surprise her at all.
yeah,
She knows who her parents are, Ma.
Yeah.
That won't surprise her.
yeah.
Do you remember if the care she got, she doesn't ask this, but I'm curious. Do you remember that the care she got was good at that time?
At the hospital?
Well, yeah, yeah.
Or at home, or,
No, at the doctors. Did the doctors, was it
yeah.
I mean, it was hard news, obviously, but
Mhm.
was it handled about as well as could be?
Well, I think so, yeah, I think so.
So at that time, enough was known about diabetes so they didn't need to guess about insulin amounts or types or anything like that, but it was understood what she had and how to proceed with the care of it right off the bat.
Yeah, Dr. Schreiber knew how much insulin to start out with and the type. I don't think there were many types of insulin then, though. I can't remember about that, Marshall.
That's fine.
If there were types of insulin.
She goes on to write, I remember vividly the thirst before treatment with insulin, but I do not remember everything at that time as traumatic. Maybe you do, she asks.
Oh, well, I think you were doing quite a few sidestepping behind the scenes, trying to keep things normal and for you boys, too. You were,
Well,
I would like to interject one thing here, and that this surprises me that the year 1956 is part of the question. I remember being maybe 3 or 4 or 5, and Nancy at the kitchen sink, and she fell, and it was a diabetic reaction, and an ambulance came.
no, I think we loaded her in a car, Marshall,
Loaded her in a car.
and took her to the hospital.
So that was not the first time.
Yeah, I think that was the first time that she had a diabetic seizure.
All right.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't think I dreamt this, but I kind of remember, I don't know if it was that same one or because I think I would remember me being really, really young, maybe, I'm not even going to say 3, 4, 5, I have just no idea, of seeing Nancy standing at the refrigerator door and just standing there. The door's closed and just standing there with her hand on it and she's not moving.
Yeah, didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and that was, I think you'd said that was an insulin shock or reaction or something like that.
Probably.
Yeah. But it's funny, I don't remember how that finished, whether an ambulance came or if this is the same
No, we didn't.
same thing we're talking about, but two different memories of it or not.
Maybe she left the sink.
You probably saw that before I did, because I was in a different part of the house. I recognized the commotion occurring, and I got to the doorway between the kitchen and the middle room, and by then Nancy was on the floor and everyone was in a scurry.
Yeah.
And so you were, if that's the same
I
one.
think that might be the same, because I think I remember that too, because I think I now remember her sitting down right there, just kind of cross-legged right on the floor.
Mhm.
But that's kind of where the movie stops.
We just had to do something,
Sure, yeah. Well, Nancy goes on to say, and this is, she says, I remember your love and support, but I also remember that it was just Dad who gave me my shots to begin with before I dared.
Yeah.
Maybe it was too hard for you also and for her to give the shots.
Yeah, I tried to do it, and I guess I just kind of fell apart, and your dad was there and came to the rescue.
Yeah. Was it always in, because I know she injects her tummy now. I mean,
Yeah.
It was
No,
always
that was
there?
in her arm
In her arm, okay.
when you did it for her. Mhm.
Okay.
And we soon learned that there was something kind of automatic that we could put the needle in the tube in that held the insulin and the needle, and then that's when she started doing her own in her stomach.
Hmm.
Some kind of a apparatus that was new then. And we were very thankful for that because she was independent then.
She has a kind of a funny memory here. She says, that kind of dovetails with what you're saying. I remember having to practice on an orange before they discharged me from the hospital.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Now now we're leaving diabetes.
Oh,
I have also been thinking back to the year 1972 and when your first grandchild, Anna, was born, premature on March 31st. And how brave you were to fly over to Norway all alone to be with us for, I think, about 2 weeks.
I think so.
Leaving Dad, the boys, home, spring farm work, etc., and having to fly home again before Anna weighed enough to be discharged from the hospital. What do you remember from that trip?
Well, I remember that she was in a room with somebody that came down with chicken pox, and she could not visit Anna herself, who was in an isolate or separate room. And but when I first walked in the room, and then the doctor was there, and he said, she had chicken pox? And I said, well, I think so. Yes, she has. But it was that hesitation. I just, off the top, it was the last thing in the world I expected to hear. So it was another few days before she could visit Anna when she would be out of quarantine.
Okay. Well, that was hard then to have her separated.
Yeah, it was very hard.
I forget how many weeks early Anna was. I'm sure Nancy knows this. We don't even have to ask Nancy this, but...
I think about 6 weeks.
Oh, wow. That early.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I've forgotten that.
maybe it was 5 weeks. It was a good long time.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you were operating on jet lag and going over there and being as supportive as you could be.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, the boys moved the furniture out of the living room and started calling Bill Dad. Or calling Dad Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they set up the ping pong table, and I guess they played ping pong night and day, and
Yep.
probably instead of eating very much or something. I don't know. Dad was not a cook. I don't know.
I remember eggs. Lots of eggs.
Cans of soup.
I suppose mostly I remember eggs.
Oh dear.
I don't know what you remember.
Oh dear.
Probably peanut butter sandwiches.
I suppose, yeah.
Peanut butter
And that's all
banana.
fine,
Yeah.
The one memory around that is that although it was fun being bachelors, and everyone likes to go back and say that with Mom out of the picture for those few weeks that the house was dismantled, I remembered a certain amount of pride that we didn't really break anything, and that the house was mostly intact when you got home, and you kind of took the house as it was in stride.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
okay. I remember Frankie saying that she, well, I guess you told me too, that she fixed a picnic or pick-up supper. You could come and pick up a bunch of food for supper one night. And I remember that Joan, well, anyway, yeah, she lived in the tenant house for a while. I can't remember her last name.
Joan. Not Joan Pfeiffer.
No.
That was
Was it?
no.
No.
Not the Rafflicks or the Townsends.
Oh no, she lived in Doug's house across from Grandma.
Oh,
Kinzer.
Kinzer, yes. How'd you remember, Marcia?
I remember.
Anyway, she made a beautiful fruit salad, and she gave it to Bill, and he put it in the car, but he forgot about it for a while, and you could have been eating that, and it was no good. But I remember I came home and
It's
I
the
guess
fermentation process. It could have been really good.
I felt so bad.
What I remember from that is when we took the ping pong table down and living room, and everything, it looked like a small bomb had gone off in the middle of the living room, and everything was pressed up against the walls around it.
Yeah.
That's my,
That's what your recollection of
Yeah.
that time was?
yeah. It seemed natural at the time, but then it was not like that.
Yeah.
Well, any other memories from that? Because that was your first trip to Norway, wasn't it?
No, we'd been there once before.
Oh, that's right. Our trip there was before Anna was born, wasn't it?
You
Yeah.
and I went in 71 or 70.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And she was
Yeah.
born in 72, was she? Or?
Said March 31st, 1972. Yeah. Yeah. Well, now there are many other questions that this is a lot about Grandma Sarah Newhouse. And I think it's probably the easiest if I just read the whole thing.
Okay.
There's so many questions I wish I'd asked, especially Grandma Newhouse, about her Norwegian heritage, her upbringing, the Norwegian language in the home. And then she says in a parenthesis, I have understood that she quit speaking Norwegian after she was confirmed, but why? And Grandma's financial support of leprosy and a children's home here in Norway most of her life. In other words, did she ever talk, tell, or explain things like this to you? I remember her using the phrase "ufta" often, but had no idea that that was very Norwegian at the time. When she sat down at the piano, she would often start out playing a Norwegian children's songs called, oh, I apologize for what I'm about to do in the Norwegian language, but I'll say Pol sine høner. Sorry, really sorry about that. That did not even jar me to question her further because I recognized that living here in Norway, and I put two and two together, then it was too late.
Oh, yeah.
So that's it. So I guess she's just curious about Grandma Sarah's Norwegian heritage, language, and that support of some Norwegian charities and things like
And
that.
she was very supportive of the lepers. And she even gave the Leprosy Foundation $25 in my name that they could have. But I would get interest off that money every year on my birthday. But they would have that $25 to better the lepers
Yeah.
in the worldwide.
So that was an international leprosy
I think
charity,
so.
and obviously not in Norway.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of
I don't
lepers
think so.
colony in Norway.
Mm.
And then there was she mentions a children's home though in Norway. Does that ring a bell? I suppose that's an orphanage.
We
huh?
always wondered about that, and I think John came to the supposition that Christy went. That he believed that Christy went to the children's home for a while.
Oh, lived there.
Yeah, until she came to the U.S. and I don't know how she happened to do that, but then she married Ole Tillerson.
So Ellie, that is that's Marcia and I's
My great-
great grandmother. She was an orphan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she was the second wife, right, of
Yes.
Ole. So
Yes,
and she was
uh-huh.
going to be the hired hand
Mm-hmm.
for Ole, and then became the wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this
And
is
he had a first family and a second family and many children and
Was it a
What
total
was
of
it?
18?
8, yeah, was there 8 or 9 in the second family?
each one was about 8 or 9.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were married in 1890s or something like that.
I believe so.
That was the second wife.
Christy died in 1923, I think.
Hmm.
So it says on the church window.
No, that's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
at Jefferson Parish. Yeah.
And Ole Tillerson died way before that. His name is there too, but I've forgotten.
Did he make it into the 20th century?
I don't think so. 1800 something.
Yeah, I think you're right. Or yeah.
Because he was an older man.
Yeah. Now this is a sweet memory. That, I mean, you already heard it. I never saw Sarah play the piano. I didn't know until I read this that she could play the piano.
Yeah, but I don't remember that Norwegian folk song.
Okay. I suppose we could. It's a Norwegian children's song. We could look it up online and maybe we might recognize the tune, but
But probably would.
because it's probably in the hymnal at Jefferson Prairie with hymn text set to it, so which is so often what happens to hymns.
Would that be Children of the Heavenly Father
That-
by Carolyn, what's her last name? Oh, the author.
Yeah, it could very well be.
Mhm.
Yeah. Though the Swedes also claim that, don't they?
I think they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of people do. It's a good tune, why not? So language. So Sarah was a native, or I mean, she was born here, but do you know, was Norwegian her first language?
I don't know. She didn't talk with an accent. Do you remember, don't you, Marshall?
I have very fond memories of Grandma Sarah, and I never understood there to be an accent, but at that age, I would have just known her as always speaking a certain way, and I wouldn't have been able to detect an accent, so I'm not the best person to ask.
Well, you talked to her too, Brian. You don't remember an accent, do you?
As I was mentioning last night, my memories of Sarah are probably the ones we should rely on least.
Yeah.
Because I think I was 8 when she died
Mm-hmm.
in 1966.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, really the only memory I have of her is lying in her bed being very sick.
Yeah.
And Ginny tell wonderful memories of the back rubs and the macaroni and cheese.
And the horse in the kitchen. And
Yeah. You should tell that story for those who don't know the horse in the kitchen story.
That would be me. This is brand new.
oh, well, yeah, Jenny rode her lonesome down the road to visit Grandma, Sarah, and she allowed Jenny to bring the horse in the kitchen.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Was this in the middle of winter or why?
No, I think it was summertime. It would have to be.
I would assume Ginny would have been not much more than 10, 11, or 12 for her to decide that taking a horse in a house would be a good thing.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, because, Jenny was game on that horse.
Knowing Ginny, that doesn't surprise me that she would think it a good idea to take a horse in a house.
Well, she might have said, oh, Grandma, would it be all right if I bring
Yeah.
Lonesome in? She probably did.
And Lonesome was a pony, right? This wasn't a big horse.
Shetland pony.
Shetland
Yeah,
pony.
so a tiny little horse. As long as the horse doesn't poop,
Yeah.
it would have been a good laugh. And okay,
Probably didn't, but I hope not.
can you imagine if all of a sudden right in the kitchen,
Oh.
the tail goes up?
Oh dear, that would be bad.
That's good. Well, that's kind of the questions about Grandma Sarah, but I think with Nancy's own memories of them, I think has the most of any of us. I'm so curious about her as well, and how she welcomed you as her daughter-in-law.
Mm-hmm, she did.
Did she?
Yeah, she did. Mm-hmm.
How did?
She was very kind.
Yeah. How did that express itself?
Oh, she was very welcoming and helpful, and whenever I need help with a recipe or cooking or something, and
Would you say the things that she taught you revolved around the kitchen, or did they go further than that?
well, they went further than that. She insisted that I was able to write checks on the checking account that we had for the farm. She insisted that I'd be able to write checks. And
As in, know how to write one, or that you would be you'd share the account.
we'll share the account.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And that was unusual at the time.
Yeah, it wasn't too common, I think. but she insisted I know how to do that. And some other thought came to my mind. Oh dear, what was it? I guess it disappeared. Maybe it'll come to me later.
Did you have electricity by the time Nancy came along? I mean, appliances like washers and dryers and.
Not when Nancy came along. No, I would boil the diapers in an old boiler on the cook stove. Build up a good big fire and boil the diapers to sanitize them.
Mm-hmm. And then you had a wringer to wring them out.
No, I didn't have any wringer. I had to do it by hand.
Mm-hmm.
I remember though a ringer, some kind of a ringer in the back.
Back little entryway.
Exactly, yeah. What was that? What am I remembering?
It was an old Easy washing machine. But that wasn't electrified. I think that it had a gas motor. And I could put the diapers in there to try and spin them. It had a spinner part
Uh-huh.
to get the water out.
So that was electrified. The spinner.
No,
Oh,
it was a gas engine.
a gas as in
Dad would have to start it for me. I didn't know how to do that.
natural gas or gasoline?
Gasoline.
You had a gasoline motor inside the house?
In the back room there, yes.
The exhaust, I assume, pumped out through the wall?
I hope so. I don't know. I never thought
They have health and safety warnings about that kind of thing now.
I think there was so much fresh air coming in that little old room, it didn't matter. I had fresh air.
Year round, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh my. Wow, gasoline motor.
Well, the only reason I'm speculating about that is because I've seen back in the old milk houses where there would be gasoline-powered stirrers to keep the milk moving and agitated. There was that same gasoline engine, and they were always piping the exhaust out through the wall so that it not either damage the farmer or the dairy cattle in the barn too. So I would hope that they would have as much care for the people in the house as they had for the cows in the barn.
Well, if there was some kind of exhaust, I suppose your dad drilled a hole in
He
the
would have
wall.
rigged something up.
Yeah, he probably, but I don't remember that part.
Yeah.
Mina, what are some characteristics of MR or Hazel that you wanted to emulate and hopefully pass down to the next generation? I haven't heard ever much about MR.
Well, my mother, she was such a peaceful, caring soul. I have tried to live like she taught us. My dad had a fierce temper and swore a lot and could get really ticked off or mad at a spur of the moment. But he was good and kind most of the time, but then he would have these spells. He had a very hard life. He lost a farm and cows died and horses died and you were depending on the horses to run the land and it was a very hard life. But sometimes his temper would get away with him.
Well, he must have been a hard worker then, though, to regain the land because he owned quite a bit of it. The Scott farm was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He had just sold the farm down at the end of the hill from Sarah and W.O., you know.
What we would call the Swartz farm.
Yeah, Swartz farm. He had just sold it to Swartz. But he kept the 100 acres from the Halverson farm. Mm-hmm. And what was your question about that?
Must have been a hard worker to
Oh,
regain
yeah.
that.
Yeah, he
he
was
lost.
a hard worker. Mm-hmm.
Well, you just told me something I never knew, Mom. I knew you had family in the Genoa area. I knew you grew up as a little girl in the Garden Prairie area, and you ended up teenage and late teenage years just south of what we call the old home farm. So does that mean that as the years went by and the moves occurred, it was because of financial difficulties, or what was the reason for the moves from at least Garden Prairie up north, or from Genoa area if that occurred earlier?
The place in Bonus Township that we lived,
Yeah.
my dad evidently had bought that but lost it in the Depression. And that's when Hugh Funderburg used to visit us, and maybe my dad owed him some money or something. Maybe he bought it from them. I don't remember. I didn't know about that, you know. But anyway, he lost that farm. So then he heard of this place on Poplar Grove Road, which was a mud road then. There was no gravel. And so he decided that we would move up there. And we got there, and the Holmes family lived there, and they would not let us in the house for a while. I don't know where we stayed overnight, but my mother was cooking baked beans on the old cook stove out in the yard to try and fix food.
That was the 2-story house where Mort's lived.
Yes,
And the family hadn't moved out yet, even though your dad had purchased it.
yeah.
Mm.
And I think it was a few days, and then they finally decided to move. I don't remember the details why.
Mm.
I was 7 years old. I didn't delve into all that stuff.
I probably want to fill a little bit of your story in about Mr. Funderburg.
Oh, yeah.
He was a director on the bank board,
Mhm.
and he used that to his advantage. And whenever the members of the bank would say a family was struggling to make payments, he would go out and make visits to that family on the farm, and he would offer to discreetly and quietly buy the land so that nothing would ever get in the paper about this family having difficulties. And that's probably why it was never made known, because he amassed a huge fortune and a huge pile of land by insider information at the bank,
Oh.
buying these farms for a song, just in turn for keeping a lot of names out of the paper. So that,
And anytime he'd drive in the driveway, he'd have I don't know whether it was a quarter or a dime or a nickel, I guess that my memory fails me, but he would hand me a coin.
Oh my. In the
Okay.
Depression.
Yes,
Wow.
this was the Depression.
Huh.
And boy, was I rich. I don't know what I did with the money. Maybe I had to turn it over. I don't know.
We asked my mom this during the Depression. She didn't really feel like she was poor because everybody was poor. Did you feel like you were poor during the Depression?
No, I didn't realize it then. I was little, and I didn't realize why we were moving or anything.
You never lacked for clothing or food or...
Oh, well, I never had the clothes I would have liked to have had, but I was telling somebody I had one white blouse to wear to high school. But
My mom had the same. She had 2 blouses and 1 wool skirt and wore that all year long. Yeah.
You just wore it over and over.
And that was probably what everybody did. Boys or girls had a different version of that. Yeah.
We were all in the same boat.
Yeah. But you never felt like you went hungry?
No, my dad would kill squirrels and rabbits, and then he would butcher pigs, and sometimes we had beef or raised chickens, and my mother would can chicken in a jar, and what do you do? Put it in a boiler, cook it for 3 hours, I think, or something.
Chicken, yeah. So let me just remember the siblings. So there was Portia, the oldest.
No, Richard, my brother, who was a school
Richard.
teacher.
Richard.
Then Portia,
Richard.
then Franny, then Bud, then me.
5, yeah. Okay, so 5 kids. Yeah.
And I'm the only one left.
That's right. Yeah.
And Gail told the story, I didn't know this, Brian, that Portia won a scholarship, but she knew that Richard could benefit from it better. So she gave her scholarship to college to her brother, Richard, and then that's when he passed away, when he was away at college.
He was a sophomore.
I suppose he
junior.
made use of that scholarship, and then he taught a couple of years.
Okay.
Oh, so he was
Up at
out of
Blaine.
he was out of college.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And
I
he
thought
taught
he
at
was.
Blaine one-room school.
Huh.
And then that next year, he was going to go to Garden Prairie schools and be a teacher. But that's when he decided he needed to go and take a summer class out at Cornell College in Iowa. And that's when he contracted the strep throat that caused his demise.
And that was in the summer?
Mhm.
Was there such a thing as any treatment for strep throat at that time, Mom, or was it?
No penicillin,
That's
no,
before
not a
penicillin.
thing. There wasn't anything they could do.
Would it have become known immediately to the family once the word strep throat was said that this was going to be very serious at best?
No, Richard sent home a suitcase of clothes for my mother to wash, which he did. And she washed them and ironed them and sent them back to him every other week or so. And she noticed there was a very pronounced smell of alcohol in the clothing. And pretty soon word came that he was dead.
You're confusing me. What would the alcohol for medicine or alcohol for consumption or?
Alcohol for rubbing alcohol
Oh,
for
the-
sore throat.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
So she had ideas just from the little hints on the smell of the clothing, or was she
Yeah,
confused?
She thought
and-
so afterwards. She put two and two
Oh,
together
yeah.
that he'd been ill when he'd sent the clothes.
How old were you?
Oh, I was 10, 11, something like that.
and he was early 20s?
Yeah.
Big brother.
I suppose he was 24 or 25, maybe. I think then, though, he only had to have 2 years of college before he could teach the elementary.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he was a little 23.
Okay.
I don't know, somewhere in there. When he died.
Yeah.
One area we haven't touched on, Mom, you had a very brief, at least I think it was brief, working career in Beloit.
Mm-hmm.
What started and what stopped that?
Oh, we just read an ad in the paper, and I had just graduated high school, and I wanted to have a job, and so I went and applied and got the job
And you
in a
were,
jewelry store.
and you sold what?
Oh, rings and watches and things like that, and sparkly stuff.
How did you get back and forth to work?
The Bauer girls that lived on Blaine Road were both worked in Beloit. I can't remember. I think they worked at a factory, but I could ride with them back and forth.
That's Monday through Friday?
Yeah.
How long? Is that a year, multiple years?
Oh, no, not multiple. Probably a year and a half or years, probably a year.
So did
Alright,
Bill get
so if you were living on $5 a week, or maybe shortly after that was a time frame when you and Dad were married, that's what you were living on. It sounds like things were much less expensive at that time. Could you give me some idea what a fellow would anticipate paying when he came in to buy an engagement ring for his sweetheart?
Oh, gee.
And you were selling it and you were making a commission on it, or just talking
No, I
through?
wasn't making a commission. I just got a flat salary and $19 a week. But I was actually making 20, but one had to go to withholding or something.
Mm-hmm. So how much was that ring worth?
Oh, 100 maybe, maybe a little over. He had some rings that were more expensive, of course, but nobody had any money, so
So this would have been 1943.
yeah.
So the war is still on. All the materials are going towards the war effort. All the steel, all the, I suppose the precious metals too. But so were there much people coming in and buying stuff? Would you have much traffic in terms of customers?
Not much traffic, a little, a lot of repairs.
Oh, okay.
There was a watchmaker in the store, and he sat in his little desk and fixed watches day in and day out.